We are back, everyone. This morning, our guest, malpractice attorney Kelly, taking your phone calls, 737-7587 if you want to join in the conversation. A lot of good information. Questions about malpractice, your experiences. We've got more calls, Clint. We'll go next to Jewel. Jewel, good morning. Hi, Jewel.
Top of the morning, Nick.
Top of the morning, my friend.
Thank you for having Mr. Kelly back on. You never fail us out here in TV land. It's always someone of intellect and very informative. Thank you.
Sure.
I wanted to make a comment. You know, I've been in a hospital bed a time or two. I won't elaborate, but with all this staph infection, if the doctor was wearing jewelry, could you request him to take it off before he put a hand on you? And also, could you request he wash his hands? Because you don't know where he's coming from or the last person he tended to. And I was just wanting to know that, and I appreciate y'all having Mr. Kelly back on. Thank you. Have a beautiful day.
You too, Jewel. Nice to hear from you.
The second part is the doctors are always supposed to wash their hands.
Yeah. After examining one person?
That is standard of care, okay? If they're not washing their hands, they're committing malpractice by definition, all right? In terms of having them remove their jewelry, you can ask them anything you want. Now, whether they will comply, that's a different matter. But if I'm looking at a doctor and he looks dirty, or he's wearing jewelry that makes me uncomfortable, that somehow I'm going to get infected, I go to another doctor.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a little bit embarrassing, Jill, to ask him to remove his jewelry, because basically what you're doing is you're calling into question his hygiene before he treats you. I think in that situation, if I were uncomfortable, I would just say thank you, and then I would go somewhere else.
Great advice. I always wondered about this in terms of hand washing with surgeons. You always see them in the movies anyway.
Their hands up
they're
like
in
this.
there, but they're up like this first. But first they're under there, sudsing up all the way up to the elbows. And I guess you wash your hands. But why are they doing that when they're putting on gloves anyway? I guess if the glove gets cut open, or I mean, they wash everything and then they hold their hands up and someone puts the gloves on for them.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much of the staph infection problem is related to doctors not sanitizing their hands. I think you're finding that a lot of these infections are coming from instruments, hardware that's being put in the patient's body that's leading to infections. Because when you cut on somebody and you insert something into someone's body, if the hardware or the instruments aren't completely disinfected, you're going to introduce a bug to the body. And remember, hospitals are dirty places. You and I talk about this all the time. They're filthy in terms of infections. They're bug infested. So there are a lot of different ways you can get infected that have nothing to do with your physician's hands not being clean. But they have to wash their hands, Jewel, before they touch you. That is the standard of care.
All right, let's go next to Penny. Good morning, Penny. Hi, Penny.
Yes, sir.
How can we help you, ma'am?
Yes, sir. I was wanting to know how many years is the limitations of when you can file a suit if you was like I had my 6th back surgery and I come home, I contracted staph within 3 days. And it turned into spinal meningitis, and I went in a coma for 3 weeks. How long is the state, you know, of when you can file a suit of whatever? Because everybody in the operating room was tested for staph. Nobody had it. I was tested for staph before I had surgery. I didn't have it. But it must have been the hardware, and I didn't have anybody to help me to file whatever it needed to be filed. So
how long ago was that?
That was in 2010. So that's a long time.
Yeah. Okay.
The Penny, your case is barred because it's been too long. You wouldn't be able to get to court. But your question is, how long is it? You would have 1 year from the date that you discovered that you were infected with staph. Because most people, if they are infected, are going to think or assume that perhaps someone in the hospital failed to disinfect equipment or failed to properly keep you clean during the procedure. So when you got infected and you knew it, the clock starts ticking, and you've got 1 year to what we call mail pre-suit notice, which is the precursor to any lawsuit.
So you get on the record.
Yeah. So 1 year. So 2010, if you had the surgery, 2011 is going to be some point, whenever a year from the surgery ends, that's when your time's up.
Staph infection, getting an infection of that variety after a surgical procedure, is that automatically malpractice?
No,
I mean, we know
not.
Hospitals are germ-ridden. MRSA, you get MRSA in a hospital because of surgery doesn't mean, right? It's almost like, unfortunately, that is the standard now. MRSA's in every hospital on the planet, and you might get exposed to it if they cut you open there.
Yeah, it's not automatically medical negligence to be the victim of an infection. Now, if in Penny's case it was determined, or there was evidence that hardware was not disinfected properly, or that there was something about the surgery itself that made her more prone to getting infected, or what's more likely, and I've told you this before, it's the failure to diagnose the infection and treat it properly. Because if you can get on top of it, most of the time you can keep the patient from having serious problems. But what happens sometimes is they don't diagnose it and treat it in a timely manner, and a campfire turns into a forest fire.
And that's what happened with her. Holy cow. Well, the bottom line on that is, yeah, you need to act. And she was saying she didn't know where to go. Let's just make it very clear. Penny, if she came out of that coma and had time in 2010, you call a malpractice attorney. She finds you, and the call is pretty basic, right? You can search wherever you happen to live for that specific. And then at your office, when they call, they talk to who?
They talk to Michelle.
That's right. And basically, it's Michelle gets the basic details, and then they run it by you, and then you evaluate whether or not that's the case. And again, in hospitals, so if they're doing everything that they're supposed to do to try to keep you clean, and you still get MRSA, you don't have a case, right? As long as they're up to standard of care.
That's right. And it's difficult to prove that they're not disinfecting equipment properly, or they're not taking precautions. You have to have a smoking gun, someone inside the hospital who basically, fesses up, and that's hard to do.
Wanted to ask you about this question that's in the news. We'll get to more phone calls in a moment. But the situation at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, where a 75-year-old woman died. There was later, just in the news now, a TBI investigation placed the responsibility for this woman's death on one of the staffers there that it appears as though allegedly gave the wrong medicine to, I think, calm this woman down as they were going to do a scan on her. She was claustrophobic, so they just wanted to calm her down. Should have been a minor thing to mellow her out. And as you understand it, what they were given was something allegedly different that suffocated her.
Yeah, based on the reporting, it is that the nurse gave this patient a paralytic, and what this paralytic does is it causes your muscles to not work anymore, and one of the muscles that is absolutely necessary is the diaphragm to make sure you can breathe. And so if you don't have that muscle working, you're going to suffocate. And my understanding from the story is the nurse got the wrong medication. They both start with the letter V. Again, this is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think in the story we were reporting it's Versed, and then a dose of Vecuronium.
Vecuronium.
A neuromuscular blocking medication.
That's the paralytic. So Versed would be what you would give to calm somebody down. A lot of people get that when they're having colonoscopies, okay? But that's not going to paralyze you. It's just going to mellow you out. Vecuronium is a paralytic. It's going, at an adequate enough dose, it's going to cause you to lose the ability to use any of your muscles. And apparently this nurse didn't look carefully to pass the letter V to determine that she got the right medication, and this lady died in about one of the worst ways you can imagine. Imagine just starting to suffocate after you get an injection. There's nothing you can do. You can't speak because you can't use your muscles to talk and or scream.
Now, these honest mistakes, I mean, I don't think this woman, the nurse, who allegedly did this.
There's no such thing as an honest or dishonest mistake. A mistake is a mistake.
All right, I guess what I mean is that she didn't mean to kill the woman.
Right.
Okay, I have no doubt about that. But this became, not every case like this is investigated by the TBI. They investigated this and it placed responsibility for the death on this nurse there. The family is forgiving the nurse, and as far as I know, there's no lawsuit filed at this time. But I'm just wondering, at this stage, I think is it fair to ask the question, if there's a staffer there, though, don't you look at the larger picture who was her supervisor? I mean, how is it just on the nurse necessarily in any of these cases when there's a supervising physician and a larger picture here?
All right. I applaud the family for doing the Christian thing to forgive this nurse, but we don't forget. We forgive, but we don't forget. And this is a classic situation where a lawsuit must be filed, in my judgment. And let me tell you why. When you file a lawsuit, you have subpoena power. And with subpoena power, you can put people under oath and question them about what happened. And someone has got to find out why this nurse did this. If this was just simply a nurse who's out to lunch, okay, then you know.
Okay.
If this is a nurse that's impaired, then you know. But if this is a nurse who's had prior problems, prior careless acts, and Vanderbilt is letting this nurse continue to practice on its premises and putting patients in danger, you need to know that. Because when you discover those things and you make Vanderbilt pay for it, that gets things changed. Money changes things, and when they pay, because they don't like to pay, Nick, it comes out of their pocket or their insurance company's pocket. When they pay for things, then they make changes that will enhance patient safety. I would like to think that because this nice lady has forgiven the nurse, again, done the Christian thing,
or the family,
or the family, that Vanderbilt will change its policies and its practice. I'd like to think that. Unfortunately, my experience tells me, and I'm not necessarily pointing to Vanderbilt, but my experience tells me a lot of hospitals will not change their policy or practice until they have been hit in the wallet and hit hard. That's just a fact of life. Because people, you can have something bad happen and say, I'm going to do something about it, and then after weeks or months go by, it's sort of forgotten. But when you've got a lawsuit that takes 2 years and you have to defend that lawsuit and the truth comes out in the lawsuit, and then you have to pay significant money to compensate, then it's not forgotten. Does that make sense to you?
Sure it does. Sure it does.
That's why I say lawsuits make a difference.
Hopefully getting answers and then maybe making it safer in the future. Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, more of your calls. Our final segment with Clint Kelly, malpractice attorney, right after this.